What's upper? It's Prima. Welcome to the Prima show. Have you ever seen the cover of a book or a billboard, even an ad advertisement, and on the surface you thought you knew what the story was about, or the movie you thought you could figure out all the details before you even got into it, only to find out that it was more to it than you thought. The details were completely different and you were completely wrong? If so, stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.
If you think you know me, you didn't really know it all. I've been through my shared struggles and I'm still here standing tall. Never the type to fold. If I fall, I wouldn't fear. I'm giving you all of me. This my blood, love, and tears. If you think you knew me, you didn't really know it all. I've been through my shared struggles and I'm still here standing tall. Never the type to fold. If I fall, I wouldn't fear. I'm giving you all of me. This my blood, love, and tears.
I'm back. On tonight's show, I want to share more of my blood, love, and tears beginning at about age 14 or 15 years old, when I came up with some life themes that I continue to use today. One being never judge a book by its cover, love and accept people as they are. Everyone has a story, and what's promised is change. During this age, I was very active in church, and being in church, I was involved in the choir, the youth ministry. I also participated in youth activities at the church. I went to counseling. We had a counselor at the church, and the counselor, I was able to share a lot of things that I had experienced at the time, up until this point. And being able to share with the counselor, it allowed me to feel non-judgmental. It allowed me to feel safe. Being around my peers at school, that was a fun and interesting time. However, it was like I lived one life at school and a different life at home and a different life at church. I had some friends in both situations, and during this time, I also experienced more rejection or hurt when it came to my father. In the house with my parents, them experiencing marital issues like a lot of families. We were functionally dysfunctional, and meaning we learned to function in our dysfunction like all households, although we don't always want to admit that. So we learned to function in our households. I had a close relationship with my grandmother. At church, they taught us so many things that, love thy neighbor as thyself. God is love, God is good. God said that children are a blessing. Come to the church. The church is a place of refuge. The church is a hospital, a place for sick people, full of sick people. Abortion was murder. Murder was wrong because the Bible said, thou shalt not kill. Do not judge. How can you see the speck in your neighbor's eye and you cannot see the plank in your own eye? Come unto God, suffer not the little children to come unto me. So we were taught many, many things that were good things. But what I lived at home at this particular time was not what I was being taught. I had left Christian school. I was in public school at this point, and being in public school, I experienced things that I didn't necessarily experience in private school. In private school or Christian school, we learned about God and God is love, and in public school, it was something completely different. What's up, it's Prima with the Prima show. I look forward to seeing you every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on YouTube. Search Prima, Pr1ma, or Caribbean Life TV as I share my blood, love, and tears. See you then. In school, when I was in school, I was a cheerleader. The year before this, I did not cheer in the 9th grade school year because my biological father, who was supposed to pick me up on 2 of those days, didn't show up, and by the 3rd day I decided I didn't want to cheer anymore because I was hurt and I was disappointed. I experienced cliques at church, cliques in the neighborhood, cliques at school, and eventually I gravitated to a few girls at school that one lived in a group home and one lived in a foster home, and we became very close friends during this year of school for me. My parents talked to me about sex. They talked to me about the importance of saving your virginity. They also talked to me about my menstrual cycle and birth control and all those great things. So we were able to communicate, and particularly my mom. My dad just was like the enforcer. So for me, I felt like we had open dialogue and open communication before, but as I got older and the challenges in their relationship in our home became worse, then we weren't able to talk as much. During this school year, I had a lot of anger and frustration. I was in a place that I didn't want to necessarily be. I remember during times this particular school year, my parents in the fighting and fussing, us having to leave and come back in a day or so. I got in trouble in school because a young lady came from another state, and I guess she was trying to bully at the time. And in defending myself and my other friends, we winded up getting in trouble. We got suspended from school. We winded up being in juvenile court, and in juvenile court, my dad was already kind of loud and intolerant, and I remember him just yelling all the time. So sometimes he would embarrass us in public. What's up, it's Prima with the Just Prima Show. I look forward to seeing you every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on YouTube. Search Just Prima, Just Pr1ma, or Caribbean Life TV as I share my blood, love, and tears. See you then. It was the spring. The school buses, it seemed like they came to pick us up whenever they wanted to. It was at different times. And my dad worked at night. And with my dad working at night, he woke up. I was at home. He assumed I came home late from school, and I did not. I was talking on the phone. He came and he was fussing, asking me why did I come home late. Dad, I didn't come home late. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. So at this particular time, he struck me in my legs, and I had a smart mouth. I still have a smart mouth a little bit, but I was like, "You're not gonna hit me in my legs. I'm not like mama, whatever." And he told me to get out. And me leaving, I went next door to my neighbor's house, and then going into my neighbor's house, my mother was at work, so she was not at home. My dad had picked my mom up, come back. My brother brought me some tacos, and that made me very sad but happy, and it was very touching. I left that night from my neighbor's house, waiting at my neighbor's house, going to a friend's house that was one of my quote-unquote first boyfriends that all we had done in the past was kissed, but he was older, and I grew up on the west side of Atlanta, and he was on the east side of Atlanta, and him wanting to be intimate, have sexual intercourse, I did not want to do that because I knew I wanted to be a virgin when I grew up. So saying that to say, we both grew up in church, and there was no pressure, but I wanted to go back to my neighborhood. And going back to my neighborhood, my door was locked, and I went back to my neighbor's house. So in coming back over to my neighbor's house, who were living in a different lifestyle than I had grown up in. They had a single mom. They had moved from up north. And being from up north, they seemed to have a lot of fun. They had a large family. They partied, they sang, they danced, and it was fun to watch, but again, different for me. Being over there, they talked about sex and talked about how it would feel good, it would be fun. And because I was hanging with them, whenever they left home, I had to leave with them because I wasn't staying at their house without them. They had already had children or a child. They had boyfriends that were in and out. They drank, they smoked cigarettes, some of them smoked marijuana. And in the marijuana, later on, I found out some of those joints back then had cocaine in them, but I was stopped by one of the daughters telling me, you don't smoke anything that you didn't see them roll. I remember being there and cutting school, going to cut parties with them where it was just a group of teenagers drinking, smoking, some in the rooms having sex, partying, having a good time instead of going to school. But because I was at their home, I did as they do when you're in Rome, do what the Romans do. Where I knew prior to that I did not want to have sex and I wanted to be a virgin when I got married. And I turned down the boyfriend that I had known for years. While I was at the neighbor's house with them and the children, I experienced my first, second, third, fourth, whatever sexual encounters because I was with them, going to the hotels, hanging and doing what they were doing because I was 15. I had turned 15 at this time, 15, and I was put out. So I felt like I didn't have a choice, and they weren't mean and made me do anything, but if I'm left in certain places, then, hey, Prima, like, he likes you, so, hey. Dealing with baby mamas, dealing with close to fighting with the baby mamas that really had nothing to do with me. I experienced things that I should not have experienced at a young age. I had my grandmother who was in California, and in talking to her, my brother brought me the phone from next door and was my grandmother. Of course, I'm her first grandchild. And she asked me if I wanted to come with her. And of course, I said yes because I told her what I was experiencing there. And it was very uncomfortable for me, but I am very adaptable. Once I agreed to go with my grandmother to California, my grandmother and mother asked me would I come home for like a week to get my stuff together so I can go to the doctor to get checkup before I went to California. In packing up and getting ready to go, I wind up going to New Jersey, meeting my grandmother in New Jersey instead of going to California because her sister was in New Jersey, and her sister, who was an evangelist, and she had a church in her home, and I didn't know any of this. I guess that was supposed to be the perfect place to go for the summer. We were there. I remember my aunt waking us up like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning and calling on Jesus, 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 just playing the tambourine. She had a pulpit like in her, well, a podium, I guess that's what you would call it, in her living room. We had to get up every morning, get on our knees and pray. And I had a couple of cousins that were there, and that was almost every morning, unless she had to go somewhere else, that we were doing that. And I guess trying to be delivered, or I think she was sincere, but that was not the best summer experience. I did have fun with cousins. I came from Atlanta to a small town in New Jersey. Going there, I was told that I couldn't wear my shorts, or I couldn't wear the swimsuit that my mother purchased me. So I was given more conservative clothing to wear. And I remember my grandmother buying me a maternity swimsuit because I needed to be covered up. So I always said that later on. I said, Grandma, you jinxed me because you brought me that maternity swimsuit. You know, that was just our joke. After having a very super spiritual, religious, sanctified summer, my grandmother wanted to stay longer, and I told her that you said we were going to go to California, and I thought it was just going to be us. My mother asked me if I wanted to come home, and I was like, yes, because if you don't let me come home, I'm going to hitchhike, because my mom promised me that life was better. Things were getting better in the home, and she missed me, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll come home. My grandmother came also, but anyway, being back at home was great, maybe the first couple of days. What's up, it's Prima with the Just Prima Show. I look forward to seeing you every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on YouTube. Search Just Prima, Just Pr1ma, or Caribbean Life TV as I share my blood, love, and tears. See you then. Being back in Atlanta, I was happy to see my siblings for one. I was happy to see my friends from church. I was happy to see my friends from school. At this point, I was told I had to transfer schools because of some of the things I'm sure that I experienced at the high school. So I wound up going to another high school. Being there, I didn't make too many friends. I was in a different place again. And at this particular school, it seemed to be a school where, I guess, a well-to-do environment. I would say that, a well-to-do environment, which was, I was between two school districts, so this was the well-to-do side. Being at that school, I made few friends, but I felt different. I felt, again, that what was going on at home was different than what I was living outside. What was going on at home was different than what I was living at church. And at church, it was an outlet. At church, it was fun. And I lost contact with friends from my first high school because we were just talking about two different things that were going on at that school and the things I had going on at my school. We kind of just lost touch. And there was distance between us. And also because I had been gone for the summer, and some of the things that I had experienced during that summer and that the end of the spring, it made me more distant from my friends or people that I had hung with prior to. Being back, my church family became a big deal in my life. I had a few friends that I was close to that I was able to share things with, along with the counselor at the church, who is now a pastor. He was a counselor at the church, and I was able to share some things that I had experienced. My parents did not ask me some of the things that I had experienced, but my grandmother did, and I did share some things with the pastor, who again was not judgmental. I had a friend there at the church that we had been friends for years, but I was not sexually active at the time, but he had gone through quite a bit of girls in the church and had been intimate with quite a few girls in the church, several. So much so that the girls would argue and have attitudes and, about to fight about this particular guy. But he was just a friend, so he was fun. We could laugh and talk and chat, and eventually in that talking, we began to talk more intimately about, in our teen ministries, we had different topics that we would talk about. We would talk about abortion, we would talk about sex, we would talk about fornication, meaning not having sex before marriage. We talked about not telling the truth. We talked about peer pressure. We talked about so many things. And some of the things that we shared, we winded up having a lot of things in common based on our parents. So both of us were two dysfunctional kids that had things in common, and we were very competitive. So when we ran track, we played at the church, we did bowling leagues, sang in the choir, youth leadership. So he was a fun guy and I was a fun girl. We were different but the same, because we were both hurting with what was going on at home. Eventually, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. We had, and thinking that you're in love because you have things in common. And oh my God, I've kind of like met somebody like me that's going through what I'm going through. It felt familiar. And the things that I was talking about, he could relate to, and vice versa, where there were other people in my world and other people in his world that could not relate to the things that were going on in our household, or either they weren't willing to share it at the church. Again, growing up in a lot of black families, I don't know about any other families, but black families, we were taught what goes on in our house stays in our house. Our business is our business, and you don't share it with anyone. We both love talking to the counselor at the church, just like a lot of the other teenagers at the church really appreciated being able to talk to this counselor, being able to be transparent, him being a listening ear, because most of us didn't have that at home with our parents because they worked. They were dealing with adult things, and children were just children, seen and not always heard, or seen and not heard at all. At the church, there were many young people that were fornicating or having sex outside of marriage. And there wasn't much punishment or ridicule that I saw displayed for the fornication. I remember the church showing us a video about abortion, telling us that abortion was wrong, having a young woman laying on the table. First she's walking and she's happy, looks, and then I guess she changed. And in that change, the baby that was in the womb was still happy and excited. Oh, it's so warm in here with my mommy. The baby was warm and cozy on the inside. And when the baby was warm and cozy on the inside, all of a sudden you hear these machines crank up. And as the machines crank up, then all of a sudden the baby's like, what's that noise? What's going on in here? You know, and then the baby's like, something's changing. And then it's like the camera starts shaking. And when the camera starts shaking, the next thing you know, it's like the baby was like, oh my God. And then you just see a blender, looks like a blender thing with just blood in it. And all of us, like from 13 to 17, are like, oh my God, did they just kill the baby? You know, so they got their point across. Maybe a month or so later, you know, the teenagers, they're planning to get together to go over one another's house. But on this particular trip, we had planned to go to one of the deacon's house, the teenagers. And in going to the deacon's house, I guess they had done this before. This was my first time. But they had pallets set up, the girls. He had girls. And the girls had pallets set upstairs, and the adults were downstairs. And the teenagers just had a whole party set up upstairs. Sleeping bags, people, you know, they had couples around, teen couples, boys and girls. It was just girls that came home with the daughters. But at some point, the boys came over and they rode the bus so far, they walked and came over to this particular house. Needless to say, everybody was doing whatever they was doing. And me not being experienced, but I knew who I was with and who I thought I was in love with. And eventually I got pregnant. And getting pregnant, I did not know, of course, right away. But once I knew, I remember telling my mom that I think I was pregnant. Something was going on. And because my parents were arguing and fussing in the house still at this point, I began to leave home because he had an alternative place for me to be, because he had left home as well. And in leaving home, he went to an environment with an older person who was selling narcotics. I did not know this at the beginning, but in him selling narcotics, then it allowed him to provide a place away from home for me to go, that I did not have to deal with what was going on at home. That eventually, you know, initially we started still going to church, but eventually it changed. I found out that he had been in some trouble, and that's why he was away from the church or in and out of church. And I was not aware of that. He had some other issues going on that meant that he had to go away. And him going away, then that meant that I had to deal with this pregnancy and the ridicule and being ostracized alone. But prior to that, my mother worked at the church, and my mother, I don't know if she told the church, I don't know who told the church, but I didn't tell the church at first. So I wound up getting a letter in the mail, and so did he, saying that we could no longer participate in youth activities. We were kicked out because we were pregnant. Disappointed, but I understood. And that's when I learned, that was the beginning of me learning that church was not as I thought it was, and maybe God was not as I thought God was. Once we got the letters in the mail saying that we could no longer participate in the youth ministries because we were pregnant and had fornicated, I felt hurt. I felt disappointed. I understood why. And the person that I was pregnant by winded up having to go to juvenile detention center for 15 months for things that were done prior to me meeting him. Later found out they were untruths. However, it didn't matter because he was gone. And now I had to walk this walk of shame, quote unquote, alone. My mom or my parents. My parents were disappointed. I was disappointed because I knew that I had other plans in life prior to life happening to me. I felt like I had disappointed God. I felt like I didn't do what I was taught to do or what I knew to do. So, yeah, I was disappointed in myself as well. And going through this pregnancy, there was some friends and relatives like cousins whose parents did not want them around me, although their children were fornicating before me. There were some children who had abortions, and I chose to keep my child. I remember my dad saying, first he said I was going to have an abortion. Of course, I said I was not because that was a sin, that was murder, that was not of God. I remember him telling me that I had to give my son up for adoption because I found out it was a boy. So I was going to have to give him up for adoption, which was not cool to me because I felt like that's not what we did. So I knew I was going to keep my child. I remember one time my dad was mad because I left home, and this was right before the father went away, and I wanted to go see him before it was time for him to go away. So I went back to the hotel, and we thought we were hiding, and his best friend's mom told my dad where we were, and when he told my dad where we were, my dad was a correction officer. He came to the hotel. I thought I was hiding from him. I remember hiding behind the door, and my boyfriend at the time went out the door. I guess my dad told him to go out the door. I was hiding behind the door, and I remember my dad peeped in the door at the hotel, and I thought I had gotten by, so I guess I took a sigh of relief, like, whew. And I remember my dad reaching around behind the door and pulling me from behind the door, and I was like, oh, I'm caught. And he put handcuffs like on my wrist and walked me out the hotel, down the steps, across the parking lot to the lobby, and handcuffed me to the rail in the lobby. Afterwards, he went and spoke to the young man. He took me to my uncle's house. I guess he was going to whoop me and whoop the baby out of me. I don't know. He gave me a whooping, you know. I don't think that was child abuse back then. But anyway, it happened. He took me to my uncle's house, gave me a whooping, and we left. And I'm thinking we're going home, and he dropped me off. He took me to juvenile detention center. He left me there. And when he left me there, you hear all these stories about what happened to you when you go to juvenile, what can happen. You have to take showers with other girls, the sexual advances you might experience while you're there, the food that you'll have to eat, and all of that. So I definitely didn't want to go, but it was like, hey, I'm here. And again, I was so angry at that time. It was nothing else I could do but just go. And I had become so numb to whoopings. I had become numb to punishment. I'm like, hey, it's only going to last for a minute. So I was just in this space. I had to spend the night. Luckily, I did not take a shower with anyone because I overslept because I was pregnant. I did not want the food. There were no doorknobs on the door. I remember that. So I couldn't even open the door to get out. And the only thing I could see was I-20 on the highway in downtown Atlanta, way up high with bars. So that let me know that I didn't want to be in jail. I liked my freedom. I valued my freedom. And I thought, a little differently about my freedom and following rules. I went on throughout that pregnancy. I still was able to do my homework, do my schoolwork, but my friends that I spoke to before that weren't able to talk to me and be around me, and the church that kicked me out, and the relatives that would not allow their children to have a relationship with me or continue communicating with me, I began to do a lot of walking around my neighborhood And walking around my neighborhood, I felt like so many people didn't know my story, and I was prejudged, or I was judged, and people really didn't know my heart, or people didn't know why I was in this situation. Or I come outside and I look like this, and you don't know that on the inside I'm like this, or that I'm unhappy, I'm sad, I feel rejected and abandoned, angry and upset, and I don't even think they cared. I think a lot of people are just in their own world, and it's easier to judge than to try to understand. So during that time, I went to Lamaze classes, and I went with my mother, and everyone else was with their husbands or, their significant other during that time. In my Lamaze classes, I was the only teenager. Everyone else were all the other women were adults. And I learned to just walk alone. Walking in the neighborhood, I remember praying, God, teach me to love and accept people as they are. I remember saying to myself, everybody has a story. Everybody has a story. Everybody comes from something, or change is inevitable. You think you think that this is the way that it's going to be, but things change and life changes. And people are judging me, and they really don't know where I come from, or me feeling almost betrayed by the church, because the church knew that a lot of things, they were aware of several things that went on in my household, just like in other households, or just like in the young man that we had our son. They knew that things were going on in the family, like infidelity, like abuse, verbal, mental abuse, drug abuse. They knew of those things. And there was not an intervention for the children or the adults. It just was not addressed. And when it wasn't addressed, then of course I feel like in relationships, adult relationships in particular, when children are involved, a lot of times children become the spoils of war. And I felt like I was one of the spoils of war when it came to all three parents in my life. I was a product of that, not necessarily a victim, because I haven't had the victim mentality, but I have felt like I was a product of what I had come from, and the lack of knowledge, information, or maybe know-how when it came to parenting. So here I am, 15 and pregnant. My baby's father was gone to juvenile detention center for 15 months. I'm kicked out of the church, from participating in the youth ministry. I could sit in the adult church with the grown adults to be looked at and ostracized or talked about. So I learned to, again, stand on my own and pray, God, teach me to love and accept people as they are, which is how I have operated through life for a very long time. I believe during every pregnancy that if we aren't mindful of how we are when we carry our children, that same feeling that we have in our heart, it carries over into the womb and into our children. I sang to my baby and read and wanted him to be smart, but I can say that there are times that I can see that I feel that he has been more down or a loner or maybe depressed or misunderstood at different times in life. We'll be back in a moment. What's up, it's Prima with the Pr1ma Show. I look forward to seeing you every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on YouTube. Search Pr1ma, JustPr1ma, or Caribbean Life TV as I share my blood, love, and tears. See you then. I remember being pregnant in the neighborhood also, and I had friends in the neighborhood, a few friends, or maybe some that had already had children that walked the neighborhood with me toward the end when it got closer to time to me having my child. And when it got closer to that time, they were an encouragement. They were there. They were looking forward to me having this baby. And we're going to be here for you. And you're going to have such a beautiful baby. And they were some type of support system, as much as they could be as children. So I did appreciate that toward the end, the bigger I got, and me just walking in the neighborhood. Eventually I had some girls that would come out and walk with me. So that was a good thing. When I went into labor, I was in labor for like 36 hours. I never had cramps, so I did not know what cramps felt like. So when everyone was like, oh, you're going to know when you're in labor because your water going to break and you're going to have cramps. And I hadn't had them, and I was told, oh, well, you're going to know because it's going to be like something you've never felt before. And it was exactly that. So I knew. I wound up having to have an emergency C-section, had a healthy baby, and me with my naive self. Well, it was funny because when I first had him, I thought he was going to look like me, and so did all my friends and family, and he looked nothing like me at the time. And if I did not see him come from me, I probably wouldn't have believed it, and neither did anyone else. Later on, maybe after a few hours, he started looking like his father. His father was not there, of course, when I delivered. It was my family, my mom, my dad, my grandmother. His mother came the next day and was able to see him. I had a beautiful, healthy baby boy, and I was a mom, and it was like I grew up overnight. Thank God I had my mom and my grandmother who I had seen do child rearing prior to and taught me so many things. So it was not hard and it came natural. So I am thankful for that guidance. I'm thankful that they were there to be with me and be a support, and that I was told that I wasn't the first girl to get pregnant, and neither will I be the last, that I should not hold my head down, that I should hold my head up, because people make poor choices and mistakes all the time, and I am not exempt. When my son was about a month old, I remember going back to the church because it was summer camp. I had him July 1st. So it was summer camp at the church. And before, I had volunteered at the church to be a youth counselor at the church for the camp. And I go back for a roundup when it's time for everybody to come. And how was your year? And how was this? And how was that? And everybody's getting up to tell their testimony. And I was super excited because now I could come back to church and I could participate in the youth ministry. I could go back to counseling. My grandmother said she would watch my baby for me. So as everyone stands up to share their testimony about the past year, the past school year, what they've done, what they've accomplished, I get up and I want to give my testimony. And of course, people are looking around. The kids weren't looking different, but you know, the adults were looking different, the other ministers and pastors that were there. So I want to thank God. I want to thank God for giving me a normal, healthy baby. He was 6 pounds, 15 ounces, 20 something inches long. You know, I had a hard time. I was in labor for 36 hours, but God is good. And I had to have an emergency C-section, and he's just healthy. And thank God, his name is La 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 La, and God is good. And of course, you see how quiet it is in here? That's how quiet it was in that gym. It was quiet. All the ministers looking at each other, they're looking at me. You know, people got their head down like this, like, no, she didn't. No, the heck, she didn't. So now it's time to break out. They're going to pray. Oh, well, on that note, we're going to pray. Everybody break out, go to their different areas. You know, we prayed, we broke out, but I didn't break out. They said, hey, Prima, we need you to come back. And I remember going back, and it was probably about four or five ministers, the head pastor's wife, and I was like, yeah, you know, and it was like, well, you can't go to the group. You have to call your mom to come and get you. And I was like, why do I have to call my mom to come and get me? Well, I mean, you had a baby. I said, yeah, I had a baby, and they said, but remember you got the letter saying that you cannot participate in the youth ministry. I said, yeah, but you said I couldn't participate because I was pregnant and I fornicated. And y'all said that all I have to do is ask God to forgive me, and God is faithful and just to forgive me. And they was like, yeah, but you still have a baby. I said, but y'all told me that children are a blessing and that suffer not the little children to come unto God, because God, you know, is there for everyone, especially the children. I said, I remember y'all saying, I said, so are you judging me and now I'm not worthy? I said, because y'all taught us judge not lest you be judged by the same measure. Well, Prima, so as we went back and forth, I remember tears falling down my eyes. I remember crying. I remember being hurt and frustrated because, again, I felt betrayed. I felt like the church didn't tell the truth, that they were liars, that they did not practice what they preached. And again, what I kept saying to myself was, God, teach me to love and accept people as they are. And I told them that I was going to be different than them. And that if you say God loves me, and God is a forgiving God, and God is a merciful God, and all you have to do is repent, and God will forgive you, and like you're restored. And the only unforgivable sin is blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, or to damn God. That was supposed to be the unforgivable or the unpardonable sin, and everything else was pardonable. And you hear that our earthlings like me are here judging me and making me feel like I'm less than and unworthy, and told me to call my mom and tell my mom to come get me, and I needed to go home with my baby, and I could come to church on Sundays. I could not participate in the youth ministry, although I was 16, and I could not participate in the young adult single ministry because I wasn't 18, which translated to me that there really was no place for me in the church besides the fact that you hurt me, you deceived me, you judged me. You knew my story and ignored my story. And there were other young ladies in the church that were pregnant and had abortions, and they came back to church. And the ministerial staff knew that those young ladies had abortions or went somewhere else and had babies and came back. So with that being the case, it just let me know that church was not what I thought it was. Later on, learning that people are people, and people believe that they're going to be saved or make it to the other side by works, by what they do, by being good enough. And with those things happening to me, it made me again say I would try very hard not to judge people. I would try very hard to understand everyone's story that I encounter. I would try my best to be encouraging. I would try my best to love and accept people as they are, which are the themes of my life, and to know that change is inevitable. And although you're here today, you don't know where you'll be tomorrow, or you don't know where you'll be in the next moment. So I hope that, and I'm not saying that I've arrived, but I am saying that that was a bump in the road and not the end of the road. The challenges that I went through, it definitely built, again, muscle. It built character. It made me stronger. It helped me to stand alone. A lot of things that I had gone through up until this point taught me to stand alone, taught me to speak up for myself and advocate for myself, as well as advocate for others around me that were not able to advocate for themselves. So those things did not break me. They helped make me. I'm thankful that I went through those challenges as a young woman. Later on, I got married to that same particular person when he came home. We had 3 more children. Not that that was the best thing, but we had 3 more children. And after getting married, we got divorced, later became friends. So after being told that there was not a place for me in the church, that made me shortly thereafter not continue going to church for a moment. And then eventually, I got married at 17, and I went to a different church. And at that church was a church that was mixed, a church that was very embracing, a church that I didn't feel judged. It was a mixed congregation, and the other church that I came from was an African American church, or a black church. And going to the mixed church was it was a breath of fresh air for me, because to me, it was like an example of heaven on earth, because there were all types of people. People were not judgmental. People were very embracing. They didn't know me. They didn't know my story. I wasn't being judged because I was a 17-year-old mom with 2 kids, and I was married. So it was just different. Like I said, a breath of fresh air. I began to get active in the church, participating in different ministries at the church. I did the children's church ministry. I helped with the media at times. I got involved in the sports. I wanted to be an umpire. So I tried to do that for a while. I did not sing in the choir. I was involved in the children's church ministry. I was involved in the media from time to time, media ministry. They did have a married ministry, so we were able to attend the married ministry and be mentored by some older couples that were able to help us through the challenges that we had. And they encouraged us to stay married and just pray and pray about it. So I stayed in the church for a long time. Although I was hurt and rejected at one church, I was very thankful for being accepted and embraced at another church. And that church, I felt like, for the most part, especially during that time, exemplified what love was: loving thy neighbor as thyself, being non-judgmental, being accepting, embracing. They embraced the whole family. And they had lots of activities and ministries for families, children, women, single mothers, divorcees, couples. So I felt like they were discipling people to walk as what we were trying to be, or what we were professing, which was Jesus Christ at the time. So again, thankful for those experiences, thankful for that experience. And that church was a church that was able to help me even further in my life. What's up? This is Prima with the Just Prima Show. Check me out every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on YouTube. Search Just, Just, Pr1ma, or on Caribbean Life TV. I'd like to give a special shout out to my viewers. I thank you for all the comments, questions, feedback, suggestions. And I also want to say thank you to all my motivators. Stay tuned. See you every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Tune in. With that, I'm going to end. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I hope that you tune in every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on YouTube. On YouTube, look for Just, Just, Pr1ma, or Caribbean Life TV. I appreciate your questions, your comments, your feedback. I look forward to seeing you next week and every Wednesday at 8 p.m. See you then. Hey, y'all. It's Prima. Thank y'all for tuning in, the ones that are watching, the ones that will watch in the future. And watching this show, this episode, it brought back a lot of memories. There were a lot of things that came up for me. I had a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions, and really over the past 3 episodes. So I think this has been great for me and hopefully great for you. Hopefully it's helping lots of people. You can share it with other people. I hope that it brings conversation, dialogue, healing, restoration for others. The name of this show was called The Themes of My Life. Things that have happened in my life that caused me to operate throughout my life moving forward, which was loving and accepting people as they are based on my experiences. A lot of people judge, and a lot of people assume, a lot of people talk about, a lot of people prejudge. You know, I learned that I try not to judge a book by its cover. I understand that everyone has a story and everyone comes from something. That's why I take time to talk to people, try to relate to people. There are some people that say, "Oh, Prima, you talk too much, or you talk a lot, or you know, I'm going to be on the phone for 10 minutes and I wind up being on the phone for 2 hours. I never meet any strangers," which is what my grandmother always said, and that is true. And other people have said it in my life, because I really want to help encourage and empower other people. I learned that change is inevitable no matter what your plans are subject to change, and change is inevitable. So I had plans. I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I knew how I wanted my family to be. Like we were told, Barbie Ken, the white picket fence, the husband, the wife, happily ever after. And what I did learn is that you have to make your own happily ever after, and happily ever after for me may not be happily ever after for you. My life experiences have helped me to walk alone, be comfortable walking alone, and in walking alone, I learned to have a very, very, very small circle. The people that are really close to me, that's small. I know a whole lot of people, and my life, I have been a spectacle, a public spectacle, a sacrifice, an open book, and I'm comfortable being that. But in order for me to show up outside like this, I have to have my time to myself and sometimes get with my small circle or with my creator. I took some notes as I was going back listening during my production time and my editing. So some things flow naturally, but I don't want to miss anything. So that's why I have the notes that I've taken. My mom, as I stated earlier, told me that, I should hold my head up, keep my head up, because people are going to talk about me whether I'm doing good or bad. It's who I say I am. It's not what other people call you, it's what you answer to. What I also learned in those experiences is how to advocate for myself. I have no problem speaking up for myself. I teach other people to speak up for themselves, my children, my grandchildren. Don't say that you're okay if you're not okay. Again, children are little people. So when I did this exercise one time, and I'm just going to say this, I went to this group and I did this exercise one time, and in the group, it was as if we had a little child on our lap, but the child was us. And the things that we do to ourselves, how we beat ourselves up subconsciously, the things that we speak to ourselves, the things that we let other people speak to ourselves, how those are like punches and blows. And in this particular exercise, they asked us to every time imagine a child, us being the children, and every time we had something negative to say, or every time we had something bad to say, just imagine punching that child, punching that little girl. You big, you fat, you did it wrong, you ugly, you messed up, you did that. And would you, if you were doing that to a little child, your little child self, would you continue to say the things and speak the things that you speak to yourself or to that little person? As a child, I always felt like I was a little person with feelings, and there were people that were around me, not my parents per se, but other people's parents and my relatives who felt like children, again, were better seen than heard. So advocating for myself, I think, was important, and teaching other people to advocate for themselves was something else that I learned because of things that I went through. I was determined to be a parent that communicated with my children. Most of all, to seek to understand them first, and in understanding them, making sure that they understood me. I wanted them to understand. And my mother told me there were no stupid questions. You can only say yes or no. And if one person tells you no, if it's someone above them, you can always go above them, which is the same thing I told my children. So I aggravate a lot of people because I ask a lot of questions. I aggravate a lot of people because I do advocate for myself. I aggravate and agitate people because I ask why, or I'm just going to figure out how to do it myself or go around. So I'm thankful that my experiences have taught me to be resilient and to be that person that if I can find a way to go around and I'm determined to do something, I am determined to do it, and I find a way to do it. I am very mindful of the tone of voice that I use when I'm speaking with my children, when I'm speaking to other people. I try not to, if I have an issue, I try not to handle that in public. I would rather handle that in a private setting. I would rather wait till we're off to ourselves or in the car or when we get home, because I remember being a child that from my father, who had a very loud voice, I felt he embarrassed us a lot, me. I'm gonna say he embarrassed me a lot by his tone, by the way he spoke. I began to be numb and combative in the aggression because I was embarrassed. So it's like, you're not gonna talk to me any kind of way. So if you yell and fuss at me or talk loud, or your tone is loud when you're talking to me or people around me, then I'm like, hey, you might want to tone your voice. So I am very mindful of my tone of voice when I'm speaking to people, and I try to tell others to be mindful as they speak, because you could be hurting someone's feelings, you could be embarrassing them, and in doing that, you cause people to shut down. And ultimately, in communication, you want to be heard and you want to hear, and your tone of voice can make a huge impact as to how successful that communication is. So that's something else that I learned from the experiences that I've spoke of thus far. What I've learned also is that believers should remember that people are coming to them for guidance, for love and acceptance in any organized religion, whatever that may be. I happen to go to church, which was Christianity, the Bible, Jesus, God is love and all of that. And when you aren't mindful of what you say and what you do and how you treat, then you can become a stumbling block to those people. And becoming a stumbling block, you can compound the issues. You can compound their hurt and their pain and their confusion, and that causes them to never return to your place of worship. That causes them to one not know how to separate God from humans, because humans tend to judge, humans tend to put people down, but God, ultimately, I learned God is my creator, loves me. I was created in the image of God, which means that I have God-like power and potential. I am a little God in feminine energy. That's the expression that I show up in here on earth in flesh. So I have the power to speak life and death out of my tongue, and those are things that I learned, and not based on what people say. It's what I say. I also want people to realize that we're only one poor choice, one poor decision, one mistake, one wrong turn from you being in the very shoes that you're judging other people about being in. That where you think you won't be there, be careful and keep a living, because it could be you. And if not you, your children, your grandchildren, somebody close. Again, because we should not judge lest you be judged by the same measure, for all the believers out there. I was told not to hang around certain friends and family as I got older, and I was in the church because they would be a bad influence on me, which is what my response always was, in the Bible, they say we're supposed to be salt and light, because I went to church. So why can't I be the one to be the salt and light and bring the flavor and brighten the atmosphere? And why can't I change them versus them change me? And I have been successful in doing that and showing the ones that thought that I couldn't, that I could, because I walk what I talk and I exemplify what I would like to exemplify. And again, I like how I show up in the mirror. I like how I show up every day. Sometimes I miss the mark maybe in how I handle situations, but ultimately I know my heart is in the right place and I seek guidance from my Creator. So I am happy about that. And because of everything that I've experienced, it is very important for me to help other people, for me to be transparent. I've given my last. I've allowed people to come and live with me. I've referred people to jobs. I have donated different things or gave things to people that they didn't know, because we never know when we may need a helping hand. So I think I'm done with that. What I would like to say again is thank you. I appreciate all the support, all the questions, all the comment, all the feedback. I hope that you will continue to tune in every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on YouTube at Caribbean Life TV, or my YouTube page, Just Prima, JUSTPR1MA. And I will see you next week, and I won't tell you what it's about. However, I look forward to seeing you then. Stay tuned.